All right, so if this is a dry line, that's the wet line. You obviously want to cross the rubbered in dry line, right? So you're not slipping on it. And then afterwards, you want to turn in so you're never on the rubbered line.
Yeah, super interesting, but we don't need that anyways because no one will have a rainy race in the competition.
And also, in sim racing, there is no rubbered in line.
Right, seems like there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to sim racing in the wet. Welcome back, everyone, to Overtake.g and another episode of Nitro Nights. My name is Rene, and today we go really nerdy as we talk about racing in the wet. Basically, dancing with cars in the rain. That sounds super fun, but it's also a topic that seems to be kind of overlooked by the sim racing scene in general. But before we get our raincoats on and dive deeper into that topic, there's one important topic for us that we have to discuss, and that is that you are probably not yet subscribed to our channel. So make sure to subscribe, ring the bell, and be informed about all things that concern sim racing over here at Overtake. Now that you did that, let's get back to action and our actual topic, as racing in the wet is a topic that's criminally underrated by many of us in the sim racing scene, and we just couldn't ignore that any longer. It's fun, it's cool, it looks great, and it's also very dynamic. That's why we're talking about this today, right here, right now. Joining us in the studio will be Random Callsign and P1TV, and we also got Chris Haye to talk about racing and dancing in the wet. But before we get to any of the juicy parts and discussions and why not and everything we can come up to, let's have a first quick catch-up of what makes driving in the wet actually fun.
We all know and love sim racing for various different reasons. But one thing in particular really gets the heart of every racer going, and that is unpredictability. Whenever things get wild, we shine, and nothing is quite as chaotic as full-blown wet racing. As soon as the first drops hit the track, it is anybody's race, with strategy, handling, and setups being completely different in rainy conditions. While most of the top sim racing titles on the market feature a rain mechanic, some are more detailed than others. In particular, the implementation of wet lines is something that really sets apart the upper echelon of sims. Wet lines are technology that simulates where water builds up on the track. The more a line gets driven, the drier it gets, which is obviously not ideal for wet weather tires. On the contrary, a drying track will still offer wet spots that can catch you off guard if you're not on the ball. Two of the leading games in this department are rFactor 2 and ACC. Both have found approaches to wet weather that are unique in their own way. Are they top of the list for Rene as well? Let's hear from him.
Now that we heard why sim racing wet can be that much fun and what challenges it brings, it's time to head over to our couch and actually talk to our guests. Great to have you guys here. We obviously got Random Callsign and P1TV. So we bring all the expertise. Like P1TV has a bit of real racing experience. You've got everything that is sim racing. Let me start off with quite a controversy, I would say. Since the existence of time, I always get labeled as the grandfather of sim racing. Since the existence of time, we sim racers always wanted dynamic weather, right? Wanted to be more dynamic, more different changes, more rain, more puddles. But I rarely see that actually being used, either being competitive or even people just racing. Why is that the case?
Well, for rain racing, it's very difficult to get into. Normally, all the races are done on the dry. And if you want to go to rain racing, you need to have a completely different mindset. And you also need a completely different setup on the car or something that will work both in a dry or in a wet. So it's not something that everybody has the intention or the effort to spend that time in training in for just one specific setting that not everybody uses.
Yeah, I feel like the same. First, thanks for having me today. Yeah, pretty sunny outside.
I can't turn around anymore. You're here already.
Yeah, pretty sunny outside today, which does not fit the topic that we are talking about. Yeah, the rain. But yeah, you're totally right. Most of the people spend 90% of their time for the competition and training as well in the wet surface, because the wet surface is so foreseeable. Like, it's this one state of the track. You really just have to focus on your tires, on your car, to understand the track, to understand the line. And once it starts raining, everything is messed up, and you have this like scenario where everything differs, like from corner to corner, from lap to lap, and you can't really properly train that scenario. It depends on the title as well, but I'm sure we will talk about that.
I was really confused because you said wet surface, but you meant dry surface and then
dry
into
surface,
the wet,
yeah.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
just so we don't get confused before we even get started with the topic. But if you say it's a challenge, which it obviously is, right? It brings a lot that you have to learn as a driver to master racing in the rain. Why do we put so much emphasis then on titles? Because we all know iRacing currently does not have rain, at least not today. So it might have it next week, in 2 weeks. It's been worked on. But why do we want it so much if we mostly then shy away from the challenge?
Well, it's not everybody that wants it. It's always a subset of sim racers that want that variability, but it also is to have the potential of at least trying it out. It doesn't mean that it is something that will be on the top considerations of the next feature to have, but it's something that people want, even if they don't want to use it. It's like having 400 cars in Gran Turismo. It doesn't mean you're going to drive them all.
That's true.
True. At least you have the option, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like it's also a great marketing vehicle for companies to advertise with, hey, we have dynamic weather, we have this good-looking rain. Yeah, it's also an element of it, but I feel like, people want to have the racing simulation as realistic as possible, and I think realistic weather is also part of it.
Okay, so if realistic weather is, then we could start the whole discussion, is iRacing a sim then, because it doesn't have rain right now? It obviously is. We don't get started on that one right now. But in your opinion then, what's the best weather system out there? I mean, we already discussed Poirot before going to camera, that currently there's always at least one feature of rain racing missing, so there's no sim that has the full-fledged everything real. But what's your favorite sim when it comes to weather system then?
I think racing sims are always sort of a balance between find sort of sub-points within any category that one does better than another. So, for example, I think Assetto Corsa Competizione has probably got the best simulation of how rain falls onto the track and then builds up, and how the water sort of pools in certain areas and then how it drains away. They spent a lot of time working into that, whereas maybe something like R Factor 2 might have a bit better sort of differentiation of feel between wet and dry lines, or wet lines that have been rubbered in versus lines that haven't been rubbered in. Again, I've not really done a huge amount of back-to-back comparison of them to really form that opinion. That's just sort of a gut feel thing, which is honestly where most sim racers actually develop their opinions. So I feel like I'm at home using that sort of methodology. And I think that applies to most things with racing sims, to be honest.
For weather system alone, Automobilista 2 or Project Cars 2, I think they do it really well, the way how the track develops. And especially Automobilista 2, it's when it starts to get wet and then, for example, the sun comes in, you'll see the morning dew coming up and the weather bringing the wetness and the air becoming more moist at the top. So visually, it's really good. And also when you hit, for example, a puddle, you'll feel definitely that you're going to have a bad time there.
I mean, the Madness engine is known for looking great, especially with all these weather effects. And I have to agree, I did, like back then, Project Cars 1 and 2, that the puddles change, right? Every single lap, you have to figure out, is it still that far into the apex, or can I actually come a bit closer now? Which I think gives you a lot of the feeling of a real race, because you really, every single lap you're working. I can definitely agree with that one. So everything AMS or Project Cars. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, if you think about Project Cars 2, especially if you do like the super overcast thunderstorm weather in the dark, it's just super amazing. So I have like this approach of talking about the visuals, but also how they implement it mechanically in the physics. And I think there's a big difference, and two ways you can come to this topic. And I think visually also back then in 2014 already, Drive Club made like beautiful weather effects with the windscreen and the water flowing on your windscreen and so on.
They had water flowing by G-force, right? Like it actually kind of glitched off the windshield
like
right
in the
way.
AC mod.
On that manager with the weather effects. It's beautiful.
And I think driving-wise, I enjoy wet tracks a lot in the Formula One series, because I think like rain always was a big topic for me in Formula One, especially when you think about Michael Schumacher, the rain god, how he was called. And those moments I remember from my childhood as well, when I watched Formula One with Michael back then. And that's something that always is connected to Formula One and the Formula One games. And I like rain racing there as well. And otherwise, in I think the Dirt series and rally games in general, also WRC, I think rain is also nice, because it's just a good underline of the wet and dirty feeling that you have when you're rallying. And like a wet gravel surface is also quite interesting and also visually appealing. Yeah. So I enjoy it in Formula One and rally, I'd say. And recently, Gran Turismo 7 also has interesting weather system.
Well, now we're
especially
kind of
tires.
into the direction of where it looks great, right?
Yeah.
And there's obviously the Madness engine brings the most variability to it. Like you can choose so many different scenarios. But what do you think is the most realistic feel then? Like which sim? You race in the wet. We both did a Nürburgring race in the wet. So what do you think is that one game that gives you the same feeling?
When I tried,
Not talking about immersion. Sorry.
Yes. When I tried Gran Turismo 7 with like dry tires or racing dry tires in the wet, it feels quite similar. If you turn off ABS and traction control and you're braking, just nothing happens. And that was exactly what happened when I drove our race car at the track in the wet with slick tires, and the ABS just pulled in and just nothing happens. Like the pedal gets like no more travel and you're just not stopping. And I think Gran Turismo nails that aspect. But in terms of drying surface over time, I think ACC does quite well.
Yeah.
With the racing line. The only element that is not taken care of that much in recent titles is the topic of the wet line itself. So
yeah, we will come to that next.
Okay.
But what's your choice then? What's the most realistic?
Well,
racing?
I still think, because I don't have any experience in that, I still think that Project Cars 2, even with the immersion, it does it really well. ACC as well does it really, really well, but it lacks a bit of the polish necessary graphically to understand where the puddles are, because they're not always visible. For example, if you go out of the pits in Spa, there's always a silly puddle over there. If you don't have the steering wheel exactly in the correct place, you're going to have a bad time there. You're just going to go against the wall or in somebody in the line. It's very, very difficult. So it drives really well in the rain. It just needs a little more polish graphically wise.
Okay, fair games. Like when we come over to wet line then, and the issue what's currently missing in wet lines, I'll throw in another title because I had one of my best wet races in R-Factor 2. Indianapolis actually was a community race because you could see the clouds and try to judge, like, will there be more rain or less rain, right? ACC kind of gives us always a prediction what will happen, but I had to ask people on Discord basically while racing, so what do you think? It's like, how does it look on the broadcast? Do you think we will get more rain or less rain? And it was just so cool to see the dry line appear from for the faster class because it was in the lower class, and then you have to adjust your driving style in general. But when we are at wet lines, the missing factor is there's no rubber in line, right? So currently, in the sim titles, once we race in the rain, we still do the same line as we would do in real life. While in real life, if we start on the dry, we wouldn't use the same line because there's rubber on it, and rubber makes it more slippery.
yeah, true.
Yeah.
Do you guys think there's a specific reason why we do not get that? It's like, to be honest, I'm not someone doing physics. We should probably have asked Aris or someone from Kunos, for example, explaining that. But there must be a reason that we do not get rubber in wet lines, right?
Well, only speculating. It's just, I would say that in order to have a rubbered in line, not all sims will track where the cars are. So they want to track where the rubber is. And also they'll have to change the handling model to dictate water with the rubber, how it will be in terms of slippery, how much slippery it is.
Yeah, but isn't it, like, first of all, most of the titles track the car's position in terms of track status, right? R-Factor does, AC does, ACC does.
I don't think ACC,
iRacing does.
iRacing does.
Not for all tracks, though, I think. I think back in the days, it was like for many of the NASCAR ovals, regarding like high or low line.
Yep.
Not quite sure if they do it now on all the tracks, but I would assume they do. I just wonder, like, why it's not in there? Because I think that would be the one last step that really forces people to do wet racing, because you have to create a completely new line. That's
you need to also think more tactically there.
Yeah, I love that.
I mean, we have realistic skies, we have lighting and weather transition now.
Stars,
and we have like the track drying and so on. But yeah, that's the last element, pretty much. Can you think of more that is still missing to water and rain in racing simulations?
I would prefer if they did more in terms of Project Cars 2 and Madness engine, where the puddle all the puddles are developing all the time because it's never static.
Which is great, yeah.
It shouldn't
really
be
great.
static, and some of the newer titles, even ACC or even Gran Turismo now, it develops in a very static place, where the puddles develop. In some cases, I understand why they do it because it's easier on the CPU to do that if you have something that is already scripted instead of tracking every single car in every single passage. I would like to see those puddles move with the cars and how the cars develop the track.
Hasn't Project Cars 2 also advertised with that they have the real dry mechanics of the tracks in place?
Yes.
They simulated that as well.
Yeah.
Like
They did that on R-Factor 2 as well. I think in the recent update that was changed how the track dries, and they tried to get closer in real life and how long it takes for a track to dry depending on where the track is. And in terms of, I was thinking about what could be missing. The only thing I can come up with is like a foggy windscreen. Because my last wet race last year, it's really embarrassing. Last year I was sitting in the car, 3-hour race at the Nürburgring, and it was super rainy. First time that I got like proper rain all day long. And I was driving and it got super foggy, the windscreen. And I was like, how should I drive? It was really like, basically like this. That's the size that I was able. And I was trying to sit in the car and looking like this with the hunt system and trying to see the track in front of me. Qualification was horrible, couldn't land a single proper lap time. And then someone told me like, oh, you don't know in your car what the switch is for, because there was one switch without any text on it, title. He was like, that's the fan. Great.
True,
and I was out there for like 2 hours not getting it.
That's the next step. Give us the max AC button.
And the AC removing power from your engine as well.
Yeah. Oh, you got climate control on? That is 2 horsepower less for you.
Yeah, true,
that would be something for Gran Turismo.
Yeah.
They got cars with AC and without AC.
Yeah.
It's like that's fun. So we agree on what would be the next step for developers. That is probably rubbered in wet lines, kind of, and make rubber slippery. In a perfect world, if you could build a title and you could choose different aspects, features of whatever weather system there is, what would you use and why?
That's sort of a difficult question, and I think it would be somewhere between what we currently have in R-Factor 2 and Assetto Corsa Competizione. The question is, actually, I think the better question is, how important is it for me? I think having an experience where the weather changes is deeply important, for someone that really enjoys endurance racing. You don't want to have a 24 hours of Spa where there's no threat of rain because, well, that's just implausible. So, yeah, I want weather to develop, and I want it to develop sort of organically and naturally throughout a racing weekend. And I think that's what ACC does very well, in the sense that it actually simulates the whole weekend. And, you do get these weather patterns that build up, and you can hook in real life data to that, and that's all very neat and nice. I also like the way other sims maybe do it with the change in feel. But it's very difficult to know what actually really matters. And I think, again, I'm going to go back to that old immersion versus accuracy continuum piece and just sort of sit on the fence and say, actually, I'm really just happy that we have good weather that develops. For me, I don't think it really matters how much that's actually locked in with real life. Maybe that's just me. But, does temperature simulation change the power output of the engine? Does the air pressure make a difference? Are we simulating that? Do we care about that? I'm sure there are sims that are taking the barometric pressure into account when they're making these calculations, but because we can't see it, we're not paying attention to that. I don't know what point I'm trying to make, but I think there's something in there.
In terms of how it looks, once again, Madness Engine, it's that in the way it develops. In terms of tires, at this moment, I think I would prefer ACC, even though sometimes it can be very narrow in the terms of pressures and temperatures it can use, but it works really well, and you have to be on top of the tires all the time. Okay, now it's drying up.
I love playing with the traction control levels then to find out, oh, this is still working or not.
And then you need, okay, it's drying up. I don't want my tires to cook. You have to go out of the dry line into the wet line.
Yeah, true.
To make them cool, to make them cooler. I love that. That aspect of driving is amazing. So those for me will be like the two ones, and also with the weather system that is being developed on Gran Turismo, where they have the radar and and where the rain comes in and you can see it. Something like that between a mix of those three would be, I think, perfect for me.
Just waiting for iRacing to copy that for the spotter function. Like if you're the one that, just imagine you could do the setup of the car, but you're also the only one from the team that can see the weather radar. I think that would be fun. All right, Michael, what about you?
Yeah, I think I would just add the visuals of the AC mod and Drive Club maybe a bit. Put it in there with the overcast. Yeah, I think you nailed it already, pretty much. Yeah.
We need to have more of those. More of that wet or more of that water in the windscreen moving about. That looks always so nice. It's so immersive.
But looking back into the history of the rain, we started back then, I think, with Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 3. They started with like the spray effect and the particle effects and the windscreen that gets washed free. And that was, I think, the early 2000s or the late 90s already. So, but we came a long way.
The Microprose Grand Prix games, the F1 games back then, they never had weather, unless like 3 or 4, not in 1 and 2, definitely not. 4 I think had it. 3 I'm not sure, but just to defend those titles now, they at least had marshals pushing your car off the track.
Yes,
and a crane's taking your car.
Yeah,
off
I remember that.
I think that was never done again in Simracing.
And Grand Prix 2 already had replays where you could skip between the cars and so on. That was amazing.
True.
Yeah,
hot seat mode.
And I think also the Codemasters with the dirt and Formula 1 series pushed rain also visually, and we came a long way, and it can only get better. And there's still some elements to implement, I think. Talking about the max AC button and the windscreen maybe foggy. Yeah.
Well, if they already do the altitude affecting power, why not the AC?
Actually true. I mean, if you look at features of sim titles, there's a lot of weird stuff in there where you're like,
And especially in competition, I think it can be used more. I feel like also the audience likes it in competition.
It should be used more. Like that. That's my biggest statement today. If you're out there and you're doing sim racing competitions, get dynamic weather in there, because the coolest thing to watch or cast, do commentary, or drive is to wonder with all the people around you, your teammates or the audience, whatsoever. Will there be rain?
Yes.
It's like, is the rain stopping now? Does the line dry up? Do we might switch tires again? Do we go intermediates? Love that.
Variability is amazing. However, don't always overdo it, because it can become quite difficult to understand. And also it gets stale as well.
Yeah, think about yourself watching a Formula 1 race. If they tell you at the beginning of the race, oh, there will be rain, or oh, it starts raining when we start the race, that's super amazing. True. I always like that. So.
And it doesn't need to be heavy rain. It can be just that little drizzle that throws you, a curveball.
Yeah.
It's okay. Should I use dry tires, slick tires? Should I go wets? What am I going to do? And then you hear the engineers talking about, no, come in to put it. And then the other engineers say, no, you stay back, you stay there.
And in this year, Random Callsign presents Random Weather in a Random Championship. You should do like an entire thing out of that. Everything.
Yes,
like random
everything
weather,
is random.
Random track. It's the Random Championship, and everything is random.
With the random combo.
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah. You don't know the car, track, starting position. Do everything random. I would be up for that. No problem. Okay. Thanks very much for joining us, guys. I hope you enjoyed your trip to Berlin. And I now demand a race that we do in the wet next time. So
yes.
Probably should do AMS2 then.
Yes.
I think it would be fun.
Or the ACC with the M2 CS car. I love it. Try it in the wet. It's a blast.
Oh, then we have to invite Super GT, because he drove the M2 CS at the Nürburgring last time.
Oh, yeah.
When he happened around for Simracing Expo, He parked next to me on the parking lot. I was there to drive some laps, and I was like, that's a bit fat, that car. And Super GT got, I was like, oh, all right. All right, but that means we got nothing else to say. There's way more we could say, but we don't want to do Nitro Nights next up 50 minutes for you guys. But if you want to know more about it or want to discuss, then obviously make sure to hat in the comment section down below and let us know your experience with rain racing. What do you wish for in upcoming sims? And what else there is to discuss? Let us know. Coming to an end of another episode here of Nitro Nights at Overtake. As always, I'll ask you guys to just go into the comment section, let us know any topics that you might think of that we should discuss in the next episode, or guests that we might invite to our studio in Berlin. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and all the other social channels to always be informed about everything that's happening in sim racing. My name is Rene, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching today's episode. If you like this one, why not check out our last one, which was all about force feedback. Or check out Rensport, a new sim racing game that we will learn more about this year.